welcome to this session. I'm David Matthews. I'm Science Business's international editor, and I'm going to be moderating this, extremely timely session on geopolitics, international scientific collaboration, and research security. So you don't need me to tell you that over the past decade, after a long period of scientific globalization, shall we say, since the end of the Cold War, geopolitics has struck back. So Europe and the US have become much more cautious about collaborating with China. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has meant that scientific relations with Russia have been severed in Europe. And now, of course, we have Donald Trump in the White House again. And so we're in a new world. And from a European perspective, it's maybe unclear whether the US is a friend or foe. So in this context, how do we actually collaborate securely on research and sensibly across the globe? So we have a great panel to discuss these issues with you today. So we have Salvatore Grimaldi, who is president of the COST Association. We have Koji Saeki, who is Deputy Director General for the Center of Research and Development Strategy at Japan's Science and Technology Agency. Welcome. We have Robert Jan Smits, who is President of the Executive Board of TU Eindhoven. And we have Catherine Sturver, who is Chief Communications Officer at Geopolitics. So welcome, all of you. I'm going to dive straight into a discussion, but there will be time, and I will ask for comments from the audience during the session. So, the first question on everyone's mind today will be about who else? Trump. So obviously, and since he's come into the White House for a second time, he's threatened to seize Greenland, which is the territory of an EU member state. He's threatened tariffs against the EU. His commitment to NATO is unclear. I could go on. Now, what does this mean, if anything, for science and technology collaboration between Europe and the United States? I think there's long been a kind of assumption that in Europe that it would be better geopolitically if the US was the science and technology leader vis-a-vis China. But does this hold anymore? So I'm going to start this off. We spoke about this before, Robert Jan. What's your view on this? Does this actually, should it impact the relationship on science and technology between Europe and the US? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think Europe is still an aftershock after the elections, of course, and also after recent statements which you recalled. And yesterday we had the statement about Gaza, and this is only the first week of this new administration. What's more to come? I think Europe still is, of course, eager and willing to work with the United States in the field of science and technology. And also, President von der Leyen made it quite clear, we're in for business, we want to work. But if I look what's going on, I look at three levels. First of all, at the federal level, government-to-government cooperation. I can hardly imagine, after the statements which Trump has made about the EU, also in the past, he was a keen supporter of Brexit, supported Farage, still supports him. Did not invite von der Leyen for his inauguration. I can't imagine that at federal level, government-to-government level, these joint committees which we had in the past, and I've been chairing one of them in the past, are going to be continued.
Right, the Trade and Technology Council,
absolutely.
For example.
I can't imagine that will be having the same procedure in the past. So that's the level, the federal level. Then at the level of the agencies, the funding agent, NIH, National Science Foundation, well, also there, they are dependent very much on, of course, the White House, and we see already the first signs that they are withdrawing. You probably heard about letters which were sent by NIH and medical, funding agencies to their scientists who are abroad at conferences, coming back at the instruction of Robert Kennedy Jr., the health department boss. So we see already quite clear now that the funding agencies also are put in their place, are not at the moment, keen on promoting further international cooperation or even withdrawing. And then there's the third level of individual researchers and universities. Well, they are keen, as always, to work to each other because science is global. But if there's no funding for cooperation at federal or agency level, that will also fall down. So I think despite the fact that Europe still probably believes in this transatlantic partnership and friendship, we have to be realistic and look for new partners. And I think Canada is more than ever a partner, given also the statements of Trump with regard to Canada, for the EU to do even more than just the association to the Horizon program.
But, okay, you mentioned Canada, but what about a trickier proposition, a pivot back to China, for example? I mean, Europe has spent the last 5-10 years kind of de-risking, in the words of the Commission, its science and technology relationship with China. Could the US push Europe back towards Beijing a little bit on the scientific front?
Well, I think the danger of the US policy at the moment is that it pushes away the EU to look for other partners. And you know that the whole Commission will go to India on a big visit,
Sure.
so India.
Yeah.
But with regard to China, there may be perhaps a review of Europe's policy towards China. I think we have to be extremely careful that we are not falling ourselves into a situation whereby we are becoming more than ever dependent on China. We know their attitude towards IP and to cooperation. But it would be an awful, I think, outcome of the Trump administration. This pushes Europe closer to China, and I think not a single European would like to see that, but that might be an outcome. But I still hope that on the transatlantic front that there could be a deal made, because Mr. Trump is a deal maker, and let's hope that one way or another we were able to make a deal on one of his exciting projects. He wants to put another man on the moon, he has all kinds of exciting projects, and perhaps if we contribute to that one, we can make a deal, but not at all costs and not at all prices. Yeah.
Any positives for Europe? I mean, in 2016, there were all these predictions that loads of US scientists would leave and come to Europe.
Yeah.
This maybe didn't, maybe it did happen in some circumstances. Could it happen again?
Well, I think the difference this time with Trump 1 administration now is, first of all, there's a majority in Congress and the Senate, but there's another thing as well. We saw under the Trump 1 administration that there was more or less business as usual in the ministries in the United States and Washington. I think this will not happen anymore. I think he now will be on top of the people in the different ministries to make sure that they follow his policy. So I think that will be a big change compared to Trump 2. So from that point of view, he's going to be much more on top of the officials in the ministries and making sure that they deliver his policy.
Yeah.
And that's not a policy of cooperation with regard to the EU.
So you might be recruiting.
I have made an appeal to all American scientists, notably in the field of semicon, come to Europe, destination Europe. I think we should more than ever before, as European universities and organizations, go to the United States or events like a AAAS, do recruitment fairs, to make sure, come to Europe. Here we work according to certain values. We have academic freedom and we have funding as well to make things happen. And it's a fantastic place to live as well.
Okay. Well, this is an international panel, so let's not stay too Eurocentric. Koji, can you give us a perspective from Japan? I mean, I don't think Japan has been as much of a punching bag for Trump as the EU so far. Not yet. Does he affect anything about Japanese policy or implementation of scientific links? What's the view from Japan?
Thank you, David. It's a little bit difficult to explain the situation, and it's just my personal observation. But concerning Japan and US, there comes the geopolitics consideration. Japan is surrounded by Russia, North Korea, China. And the closest island of Japan is just 110 kilometers from Taiwan. And also there is Senkaku Islands of Japan, which are claimed by China. And 4 islands in the northern part is still occupied by Russia. Under that situation, US is the only allied country with legally binding security treaty. That means, as a policy level, we continue the collaboration. We like to continue the collaboration, and of course in the SDI area too. But as to the implementation side, there is some effect. The implementation will be affected by the various actions or policies adopted by US and conducted by US. At the same time, we, Japan, put a great value on multilateralism. And also our focus of attention is global issues like climate change and so on. So the take kind of balance or work between the lines is very difficult. But a little bit different thing is geopolitical situation in Japan is really tough. So we have to rely on US.
Yeah. I guess Japan is possibly even more of a tricky security dependency than Europe on the US,
Yes.
right? Which makes overall policy change quite difficult. But you mentioned the implementation, right? You mean the executive orders in the US that have disrupted scientific funding already?
If the funding is there's some how do you get stop of the fund release of the grants for the agencies or as the Trump administration's order. Still, science NSF is affected by that one. Not clear. But if that happens, of course, there's a good big damage for our collaboration.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how long they last and how much disruption they cause. Anyone else on this question? Is it going to be business as usual on science and technology with the US, or are the next 4 years going to be quite disruptive? Salvatore, if you'd like to come in.
Yes, this question about Trump is very difficult, because I think we can able to answer in 3-4 months after the thunderstorm, the political statements that we have every day. Will have a less impact, and so we can really have the situation clear. I'm optimist, I would say, because intrinsically the U.S. system is based on international collaborations. Be aware that the 7% of the students in U.S. are international, and in the Ivy League university, this percentage is very high. I cannot count, and I try to find this value, this number related to the faculties that are international or they have a previous nationality outside the U.S. So you can imagine that the risk is the people come back at home. So,
right.
And the only fact that I can share is that there was a small earthquake 1 week ago, because when they tried to freeze the federal grants, and so the court rejected this decision. And but talking with colleagues in US, they were very, very, very scared, because you can imagine that you write proposals, you are expecting the evaluation, or you already win a grant and you discover that everything is frozen for a while.
Right.
So
right.
It was the only fact that we have. And it is in the direction to say, let's open the door to welcome back our colleagues that are working in US. But I'm optimist in general sense.
Okay, so your US acquaintances feeling very unsure about their funding situation, and this, it's bad in itself, but it could be an opportunity for Europe to win back some of the people that, have left in droves for the US over the past 10, 20 years or so. Okay, I'd like to open up to the audience. Does anyone in here have a view on this, on whether Trump should alter Europe's attitude towards the US in terms of science and technology cooperation? Or should we try and go business as usual, hope that collaboration continues and won't be too much affected over the next 4 years? Would anyone like to comment? Or is this just too overwhelming? Are we still kind of reeling too much from the first week or two?
Thank you. Before I answer that question, I have a question to Catherine Stove, if that's okay. How she feels that this will impact our data relations with the US. Will it further complicate our ability to work together with the US with regard to our research data?
So if you look at transatlantic connectivity, that is, of course, first of all, let's put it this way, 75% of research traffic, international research traffic from ASEAN goes to the US. So the rest of the world makes up 25%, and a large percentage of that is actually Japan. But 75% goes to the US, so that's a huge amount of traffic. We have completely reciprocal agreements, transatlantic, between Europe, the US, and Canada. And we run, at this point in time, 11 100 gig links transatlantic. So even if the US were to do anything, our researchers would still reach the US, so that's clear. Within the US, we connect, of course, Internet 2 as the main NRAN in the US, but also ESNet and NOAA have separate networks that we connect to. At this point in time, all of those institutions bring their connectivity to Europe, bring their connectivity also to CERN directly. I find personally that terrestrial cable capacity and submarine cable capacity are very resilient when it comes to politics. Yeah, we haven't seen any enemy action in the Atlantic yet when it comes to submarine cable systems failing. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It was very interesting. Okay, so no reason to expect a major change on the nuts and bolts of research data transfer. Yeah, okay.
No.
Anyone else from the audience? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nusha Pajwani. I'm the head of science at COST. I was just wondering what the panel's thoughts were on. So Trump has come in. He has a completely different idea on diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion is not just, of course, a tick box exercise, but it's important to drive innovation, and this is something that we're pushing for in the EU and have been consistently trying to do so in various organizations. So I was wondering what the panel's thoughts are on how we're going to square the circle, given the polar opposites in terms of perspective on diversity and inclusion for the coming few years. Thank you.
Right, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, it could create some difficulties, right? European organizations have strong inclusion policies, and US ones are now almost prohibited from having so. I mean, any thoughts from the panel on this? No? Well. But no, it's an interesting point. It's an interesting point. There could be some butting of heads over, inclusion policies. That's certainly true.
I think we are all hoping, of course, here in Europe that there will be, of course, this will go over, this will blow over, and that even, that's why I refer to the Trump 1 administration, where there was business as usual, even if he had, a lot of negative comments about the EU. But what I said, I think the situation now is different, because he has seen in Trump 1 administration that often the departments and the officials who were working there did not follow his policy, and now he wants to have full control of that. So I think it will be a different ball game this time than in the past. And we are also ourselves, of course, extremely vulnerable, because many of our data from universities and are in the clouds, organized and held by American-based companies.
Yeah.
And what will be their attitude towards all these changes? Will they still play ball and be global players? So there's a lot of uncertainty. In a situation of uncertainty, I think you have to really redefine your strategy, and that's why I say look for partners who perhaps are interested to also more than ever work with Europe. And I mentioned Canada, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand. There's enough powerhouses across the world where we could intensify cooperation with. And it's just too bad that these things are happening.
Okay, thank you. That's a really interesting point about cloud and data vulnerabilities to US tech giants. Very interesting point. Okay, I'd like to move on to the next section of the panel. Okay, we don't want to let Trump completely dominate our attention, as he's so good at doing. Now, we have, two representatives of organizations which are, international research collaboration infrastructure organizations, right? So I want to hear from you both how you've navigated some of the challenges over the past 5 years, with tension with China, Russia's war against Ukraine, conflict in the Middle East. There have been so many things to navigate, and you both have members and you both serve countries which are at loggerheads, geopolitical, or even actually at war. Who would like to go first, Salvatore or Catherine?
Okay. Look, let's take the example of EduRoam. We spoke last night already about EduRoam. In 2024, EduRoam worldwide had 8.4 billion authentications. EduRoam is today a reality for students all over the world. Everybody at their institution uses EduRoam to log into the systems at their university. It's I don't know how many of you know EduRoam, I hope quite many. But it's everywhere. EduRoam is everywhere. And then if a service is everywhere, you don't ask yourself the question anymore, how does this actually work, right? And we know from Star Trek that federations are complicated. And we also know that nobody owns a federation, right? So EduRoam is a federation. And what it means is that every university implements their EduRoam instance on their campus. They sign up to their national federation standard, and their national federation comes together in the International EduRoam Federation. That's where everybody meets, everybody has the same rules, there are some radio servers in all the continents, and then we have an EduRoam global governance, which is 2 representatives per continent. And they come together and they set the EduRoam standard, they decide where the service goes. And then you have, for example, because EduRoam is a service that's entirely developed by European Union funding, it's maintained today still by European Union funding. So when Russia started the war against Ukraine, on the sanctions lists were, of course, services developed by European Union. So we could no longer offer EduRoam in Russia, according to the sanctions.
Yeah.
Which is super if you're a European Union organization as GEANT is, but it no longer works in your global EduRoam governance because you have representatives there who will say, hold on, we don't follow those sanctions. Why would, my scientists now no longer be able to use EduRoam in Russia? Why would Russian scientists coming to my institution no longer be able to use EduRoam when they come to me? Mm-hmm. So we suddenly found that a completely positive service that brings students together, you feel at home as soon as your phone goes ping in an airport and you connect to EduRoam, suddenly we were in the middle of politics, extreme geopolitics, and how do you find that consensus? Can you actually find the consensus in these situations? It's been really, really difficult. The end of the song was that because GEANT is an institution based in the Netherlands, we had to take down the service. But that was difficult for many of our African partners. It was difficult for some of our Latin American partners. It was difficult for many of not everybody had this strong feeling.
Yeah.
But for us, it was very easy because one of our members is, of course, the Ukrainian NREN, and we needed to support the Ukraine. And it was a willingness in our community. So we are engineers.
Yeah.
We're not politicians, but suddenly we have to become politicians. It's really weird.
But what's the lesson from this? It's like it's almost impossible to have sort of politically neutral research infrastructure because someone ultimately is paying, in this case, i.e. the EU, and therefore you have to follow their rules.
This is the question. I mean, the EU pays the bit in the middle. The rest of it is paid by all the universities in the world. And they all need to have a say, and this is how federations work. Everybody has a say. It goes up and up and up.
Okay.
My lesson learned is that one has to have, during peace times, you have to establish the relationships that carry you through these difficult conversations.
Right.
And you need to really invest in your relationships globally so strongly with universities everywhere.
Okay.
So that when you come and you say, it's working, but now we need to take a step back, you have this diplomatic working together that you can together still find a consensus. And it doesn't break everything apart. But that is real work. And that's the interesting bit, which we have discovered. But I don't think we were ever expecting that, really.
It's quite a challenge. Salvatore, COST is an international organization. I mean, largely European members, right? But it's also has some geopolitically, shall we say, non-aligned, not quite non-aligned countries, but not Serbia, for example. So that also Israel and Palestinian researchers work together in some cases on some projects. So how have you dealt with the past
because
2 and a bit years?
You mentioned, of course, very crucial situation. No? So Russian, Ukrainian, and Middle East, but there are also normal of political tensions, discrimination among countries for religion, for race, for gender, and so on. So, we need to solve, also mitigate this problem in the context of the research. COST organization is founded by EU, so follow, of course, the values of the European Union, but it's open also to the neighbor countries. And so all the African countries in the Mediterranean area are eligible to be part of our grants, not to manage grants, but to be part, so to be supported by the grants. And also we have other international participants like US, 500 researchers are participants from US, 100 from China, so around all the world. So, but from the science perspective, they're different from the innovation and technology. From the science perspective, as a scientist, I would say that the science is really an open space for reducing any kind of tension and discrimination. And the reason is simple. A scientist, the polar star of a scientist is the advancement of knowledge or to find a solution for the society. So they would like to be famous for a discovery. Okay, they don't care about your race, your country, that both countries are fighting and so on. But this is, of course, my opinion as a scientist. But as a president of COST, I realized that it's true. And we have a tangible example of unbelievable collaboration that from the perspective of political or other kind of a perspective can be impossible, okay? So we have our grants that we call actions are a collaborative research network that are supported for 4 years, and they are organized through working groups, okay, to reach some goals, research goals. And in the working groups, you can find easily representative of Serbia and Kosovo, or Israel and Palestine territories. Nowadays, it seems impossible. Also collaborating in some sensitive topics like cybersecurity. And so it was for me that you understand now that I am optimist by nature, but in any case, you can see that it's really stimulating, to work for these kind of programs that allow to mitigate also as a side effect to mitigate some tensions and reduce discrimination and make the diversity as a benefit. So I strongly believe on this, and I hope that this mechanism will be reinforced as much that we can.
May I jump on this issue of partnerships? I think this situation which Europe is now is also, I think, a wake-up call with regard to our relation to Switzerland and the UK. We had a very embarrassing situation that in Horizon Europe, these countries were not participating, not associated till the end. I think we can't afford it anymore. I think from day one, Switzerland and the UK have to be fully involved associated members in the Next Horizon program. I think to be extremely clear for we can't afford it anymore with these powerhouses being in an embarrassing situation that, it takes years before they can really enter.
But doesn't this depend on a Swiss referendum in 2027?
Absolutely, it takes two to tango. If the Swiss don't want, that's another thing. But I think from the European Union side, given the current situation, we can't afford that these powerhouses are going to be excluded, or that we have another years of negotiation before they can be associated.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Horizon Europe, because I want to press you, Koji. Japan is in negotiations to join Horizon Europe. Can you tell us how it's going?
Well, Japan's global presence in science and technology has been shrinking so fast, and we recognize Japan is dropping out of the international brain circulation. From that standpoint, we'd like to expand our international collaboration, and the framework program, Horizon Europe, is one of the good platform for that. So we believe that, and we have started consultation on the association issues last December. But still, I think there's much to do, much to negotiate. I hope we will have a good mutually agreeable condition and
Okay.
start.
But there are things short of Horizon Europe that you have been doing, right? There's a new Japan-UK scheme to improve brain circulation.
Yes, it's not limited to UK, but,
Okay.
but we started a new program late 2023, aiming at promote Japan participation in the international top research community. And through this program, we hope that young scientists can dive into these research communities. And there are several types of the program, and one is joint call from the
Okay.
JST, Japan Funding Agency, and other countries' funding agency.
Huh.
It is just started, and there's a precedent is on NSF and UK's BBS Biotechnology and Bioscience Research Council.
Yeah.
Just to
Okay.
two example.
Okay, but other European funding agencies maybe set up other joint
of course.
funding for brain circulation with Japan as well? Okay,
We can
interesting.
do so.
Okay, great, thank you. This panel is also about research security as well, which is a big topic like no other. So, everyone on this panel has interesting stories to tell about the new challenging environment. Robert Jan, you're sitting in Eindhoven, one of the homes of ASML, one of the, I guess, key semiconductor firms in the world. Incredibly valuable trade secrets and know-how sitting near your office. How have you been dealing with that? Presumably there's been quite a lot of illicit interest in all of those secrets.
Yeah, well, we had a number of I think all universities were constantly hacked on a day-to-day basis, but we had a major big one 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And that forced us to immediately shut off the whole system, so all the servers. And for 1 week, we were able to deal with the situation, put things back into place. But it shows also there that universities need to also increase their policy with regard to cybersecurity. And it has to do not only with cybersecurity, but also with regard to the researchers from abroad. They give access to their labs, for instance. And that's a big issue at the moment. And not just in the Netherlands, I think many universities. With whom do you work? Who do you give access to your labs from outside Europe? And how can you ensure that the data which you have, and a lot of data, of course, coming out of cooperation with companies, notably for Eindhoven, with companies like ASML and Philips and NXP and Thermo Fisher, that these data are secured in a way that it can be hacked. So it requires for the university also there to step up the gear, and a lot of investments are necessary. But that's unfortunately in the world in which we live at the moment, and we have to bite the bullet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been said, that universities are seen as a kind of soft target for ransom attackers or even people stealing industrial secrets. Is this still true in the Netherlands, you think, or have they upped their game, or is there still more work to do?
No, I think we had it a couple of years ago in Maastricht University, but I think it's happening all over the place with universities. It proves, as I said before, we are in a different world, and it is not anymore, unfortunately, the situation where everything is open, we share everything. It's a different world, and also universities have to rethink from that point of view their strategy, with whom they work, the openness they give to data and to publications. So it's for universities also a turning point. It's a little bit also linked to the fourth generation university I mentioned, that if you want to play that role, you also need to probably think a lot about your new approach. At Eindhoven, we are also reaching out more to the defense departments, because, everywhere we need to increase the investments in defense. And that also requires, if you work with the Department of Defense and the Army, higher levels of security inside your university.
Yeah.
So it's in the air, and we have as universities make sure that we move on.
Necessary, but it sounds expensive.
It's very expensive, and we put, of course, the bill with the public authorities to make sure that they are, but their policy is also aimed at that.
Okay. Catherine, Gian, you are looking after some of the most sensitive research data flows in the world, right? Allowing it to seamlessly cross the world. But, we've seen undersea cable attacks recently in Europe and potentially elsewhere. Has this created a greater need for kind of diversifying the cables through which research data flows. We were talking about this a bit earlier. It would be great if you could expand on it.
Yeah, goes a bit into a question that you raised earlier.
Yeah.
First of all, I think it's absolutely, it's really good news that Europe is taking its digital sovereignty serious these days. We've seen it in the Global Gateway programs that there's major investment now made globally into European-owned submarine cable systems. And as GEANT, we are in the deals here because we want to, of course, make sure that a part of these submarine cable systems, part of the capacity is right there for research and education in Europe, connecting to the rest of the world. So there's the Bella cable system to Latin America, entirely owned by the Europeans. There's the new Medusa system crossing the Mediterranean. There's the new Blue Ramen system going all the way to India. We talk about Polar Connect. We really look seriously at Europe's international submarine cable system capacity and own it and benefit for it for research and education, which I really like. But that's the global view. But then we have our own seas around Europe, right? The Baltic Sea, we have the Mediterranean, of course, and many cable systems running through that, which we're using. So one of the approaches that's become absolutely necessary for us is to really figure out together with our partners what are the resiliences and the redundancies in these cable systems. How many cable systems do I actually need, per ocean to be absolutely redundant?
Right.
And look at the capacity, how countries are connected to each other if submarine cable systems are in there. I mean, the Nordic partners in NordUnet have now the aim to have triple links between all of the Nordic countries because they are so focused on submarine cable systems. This is absolutely necessary now for resilience. And that has a cost, of course. That has a cost, and that cost needs to be handled by somebody. So, we need to look at our underlying infrastructure and realize we're using it every day. We need to keep funding it. And that is, of course, something that GEANT is very interested in this. Let's not forget the underlying infrastructure. Let's not forget in all of this additional layers that come on top of that are so interesting to politicians and so interesting to everybody. Let's do this. We need the underlying in bits, and they need to work, and they need to be resilient, redundant.
Okay, so you are kind of diversifying the cables through which research data flows.
Yes, and we need to diversify through investment
Yeah.
and resilient procurement.
Okay, very interesting. Okay. Finally, Koji, if I could turn to you to get a sense of the debate in Japan over research security. Where do Japanese universities stand on research security? Are they taking similar levels of care as Europe and the US, or where is the debate in Japan?
It's not yet at the same level. Japan's academia values the freedom and openness of science or research quite highly. And after the World War II contribution from the academia side, they regret that kind of activity, and there is strong attitude to avoid security issues. And we may call it pacifism.
Pacifism. Okay, interesting.
So dialogue between government and academia about security issues have been quite rare. So there's we are in a process to gain understanding about necessity of research security. And for the first step, we use the research integrity as part of the securing the trust toward the research activities. Now, we, CRDs, conduct various researches on the other countries' system and active schema and activities. And we put them into the government deliberation. And the last December, Ministry of Education, Science and Technology has published a paper that stipulates shows that its direction for the research security actions. And we are now in a process for preparing the trial for that scheme. But still, we need a conversation between academia and government.
Okay, so it sounds like Japan is, I guess, several years behind maybe where Europe is on terms of research security.
Yes, but for some European universities, not so.
Right. Yeah,
So,
there's a diversity. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
But it's just a pity that our values for cooperation, for openness, that we, which you have in Japan as well with regard to cooperation, that we cannot, more or less respect these and have these for international partnerships. I mean, we had a world in which we were open, there was cooperation, sharing, access to everyone who wanted to come to our universities. And it's just too bad that, given the geopolitical situation, this situation are over. But yeah, it's a reality, all universities have to deal with that reality.
Well, let's not lose hope. It may return, the period of open scientific globalization. We have just about 3.5 minutes left. I'd like to ask the audience, has anyone here experienced major cyber attacks or research security incidents they'd like to talk about? Has this been on the increase recently? I mean, you don't have to go into massive details, but is this increasingly a worry for people over the past, shall we say, 5 years or so? Would anyone like to comment?
Yes, my name is Toril Hernes. I'm from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and we are located up north. And of course, our universities all over Norway, and especially up north, has been really experienced and increased, cyber attacks and so on. So that the universities need to be really aware of this, and also to take responsibility and put efforts in their own security due to export control and really take this seriously. That's for sure, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would anyone like to respond? I mean, where do we go from here?
In the end, it's completely asynchronous, right? I mean,
I'm sorry?
It's asynchronous. These attacks, they will come.
Yeah.
They will be there. And they will find your loophole.
Yeah.
And I think what you need to make sure is you need to be able to recover as quickly as possible. And that, every, business continuity and recovery plans need to be at the heart of every tech institution, whether that's a university, whether that's an organization as mine. We need that. Because you cannot prevent fully the human error or the loophole in your systems.
Okay.
I have to step up the gear. I mean, that's for Europe as a whole. Europe has always been a believer of cooperation, in trade, openness, and the multilateral system. We believed in that. And while it was breaking down over the last, say, 10 years, let's be clear, we kept on as Europe believing in let's restore the multilateral system, let's restore the global cooperation. And we believed in it, while actually it was a world which was disappearing and crumbling under, while we are looking. And I think now the wake-up call is more than ever there. We enter another world, and that requires complete different working methods, including in the field of cybersecurity, including the field of trade, including in the field of health cooperation. It's a different ballgame.
Okay. Well, on that note, the timer here has turned a threatening shade of red, which suggests I'm afraid we run out of time. But thank you all for joining. Can you give a round of applause to our very interesting panelists and all the questions to the audience? Thank you for joining.